northern France. From there, you went on over
to the Bulge.
To the Bulge.
Yeah. Yeah, we arrived at Soissons on the 6th of December. Everything was peaceful. The fronts were stable. We were having a great deal of success. The Americans were. And we were making plans for our Christmas holidays, you might say.
And this was in 44.
44, December.
Well,
little did we know that the Germans were preparing for a massive counterattack.
The Allied forces had moved the Germans from Antwerp over there at Belgium, essentially,
yeah,
all about 528 miles back to the Ardennes, which is kind of, I understand the Ardennes is kind of on the border of Belgium, Germany.
And Germany.
Yeah, Belgium and Germany. And I've done some research because you told me of what happened to you shortly after you got there. And I found that during that summer, when the Germans were retreating, they were building, at night they were moving armament and men up towards the Ardennes, staging areas around the Ardennes.
Yep. I don't know how many divisions, 15 or 20 divisions, they moved up there undetected by the U.S.
It was 20 divisions. There were 8 Panzer divisions. And in that 8 Panzer division, there was 400 of those huge Tiger tanks, which weighed about 70 ton. And they had 200 of the Jag Tiger tanks, which weighed 78 tons. Awesome firepower. Both of these tanks had 88 millimeter high velocity guns, and they would essentially go right through the Sherman 30-ton tank that we had. And when one of those rounds hit those tanks, as you know much better than I do, but from the research I've done, it would absolutely blow up the ammunition, the gasoline, everything in the tank. It was not a survivable hit. Some of the tank commanders talked about those Sherman tanks, our American tank commanders, and they indicated that trying to take down one of these Panzer tanks was like throwing a marshmallow at a building. It wasn't going to happen. The only chance you had was to get alongside of one of these tanks
with a bazooka.
With a bazooka or with your tank and take out a track. The turret still moved and the tank still had machine gun fire, and the tank also had, according to these tank commanders, a deadly range of 2 miles. So if you were in a tank and fortunate enough to take down, and you had to be about 200 yards from the Panzer to take out a track, what now? You're not going to outrun the 88 millimeter round, and you can't get 2 miles away before they can turn that turret. So this was part of 1,700 armored vehicles that hit you guys, along with 200,000 Germans, on December the 16th. To see the firepower is just, you described it when you and your men were taking these 2 towns and were caught out in the open. You described it as the 4th of July. Yeah. So they had that firepower around there someplace. Anyway, to read your history, folks, you will see what these guys went through. In the situation where they pushed the Germans back into Germany, they outran their supply lines, which means food was rare, ammunition was rare, clothing, your backup support, everything you needed was a scarcity for you. Is that right?
Yep.
And you told me that you and your men had been in foxholes, I think, for 126 straight days?
90 to 100 days.
Okay, and you thought that you were going to get some leave time.
And that was the purpose of being at Soissons, was to regroup, get some replacements, because we had a lot of people killed and wounded, and so we needed a lot of replacements. And we were getting all that stuff on around the 6th, 7th, 8th, up until the 16th of December.
And then when you thought you were going to go on leave, you got some bad news. What was that?
We were told on the 17th that go draw new automatic weapons because we turned the old ones in. You're going up to the front. We don't know where, but you're going up to the front. We stood around the 17th and 18th, and finally they got a bunch of trucks up to pick us up and head us up towards the front. It was snowing like hell, raining, freezing rain, cold. We didn't know where we were going. We were being challenged all along. The convoy was stopping periodically. And on the 19th, we arrived at Webermont, which is north of the Bulge, a very important spot. And we arrived at Webermont. I was told that my battalion would be a rapid reaction force that would be prepared to mount up on trucks and to move to wherever the Germans might have a breakthrough. So that's what we did from the 17th up until about the 25th. We moved around as a fire brigade, moving from one spot to the other, repelling German attacks, counterattacking.
I have one question for you. You were a commander of 750 soldiers at this time.
Yep.
You guys had been fighting the Germans, had driven them 500 and some miles, and most of that distance you were on foot. This is amazing. Here's the question I have for you. After these guys think they're going to go on leave, how do you come back and say to them, we're not going on leave at all. We're going to be a reactionary force, and we're going to go meet the Germans head on over here?
Well, they were wanting to know what the hell's going on here.
And then you were too, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, I mean...
Because I didn't know what the situation was. Here, I'm a battalion commander, and I don't know what the situation is.
All right. We're going to take a break right now, and then we'll come back to our website, Hey Whatever Happened To, and continue our interview on our website so we can get to the rest of it. Welcome back. I'm Roger Thompson, your host for Hey Whatever Happened To, and our guest today is Lieutenant General retired Richard Seitz. We were talking about you were in the middle of the Battle of the Bulge. Now, it started on the 16th. You're there on the 19th. We've described that there are 20 German divisions in your area of the woods. Essentially, you are all formed up on about a 40-mile line.
I think there was a 40-mile front that the Americans were holding.
Yeah.
With one brand new division, one beat-up division.
And you didn't have near the armament and stuff that the Germans had. So there were several key places, but I want you to tell us what happened first to the 19th, and then I want to get on to Bastogne and what was important about Bastogne and how, what the Germans were doing.
From the 17th to about the 26th, my battalion was, I think you'd call it a fire brigade. It was moving around every day to where the Germans were making some effort.
So the hot spots.
We got a lot of combat in every damn day.
Yeah.
Things settled down in the Bulge right after Christmas, because on Christmas Day, for the first time in 2 weeks, the sun came out, the American Air Force came out, and we got air support for the first time. So the German attack really stymied on about the 25th or 26th. Until you remember, it was on Christmas Day that Bastogne was relieved. But anyhow, the Americans were kind of policing up the battlefield, so to speak, until the 3rd of January, when the Americans started their counter-offensive. And that was a bad day for me, really. It's a day I think about every day because we lost 120 people there that morning and that afternoon. It was a place not too far from Tri Points. As a matter of fact, about 2 miles. And I was told to pass through the 2nd Battalion of the 505 82nd to seize this town of Tri Points, and then to move about 2 miles to take this little town that's up on a hill. A strange thing happened. I got my orders too late to make a reconnaissance, so I relied on the 2nd Battalion 505 commander for my intelligence. His name was Vandervoort, a hell of a good soldier. I asked Ben, what's the situation? I would deal with him differently today. But he told me, Dick, there's nobody out there except a bunch of old men. So I made my plans on that basis, and probably a little too aggressive. We had no trouble taking Tri Points. But then as we moved up toward this other little town, the snow's about up to your ass, up to your...
Right. That's descriptive. We understand that.
It's cold as heck. The going is very slow. And we got to about 300 yards from the top of that hill. And those old men turned out to be a reinforced battalion. And they laid down a machine gun protective fire and mortars. It made it look like the 4th of July. You couldn't move. We couldn't move forward. Every time one of my soldiers got up, he was shot. And finally, I went to get my reserve company commander. I was going to have him do a flanking movement. When I got there, here he is lying on the ground. The company commander had just been shot. The Germans are counterattacking. So I went back up the front where most of my troops were, told everybody, just dig in the best you can in the snow, don't move. I'll get you out of here later on today. And so we stayed there the rest of the day, and that night I pulled out, moved around to flank, and was able to take the objective.
Did you have, was there any artillery support available for you?
I had no artillery support at all.
What about communications?
Well, I was communicating with the division commander because he kept saying, why aren't you moving, Dick? And
who was the division commander?
It was Jim Gavin, was my old mentor.
Sure, from the airborne school.
But this place was called Monte Foss, up on top of this hill. And I'll remember Monte Foss every day of my life because I felt so helpless. Incidentally, the battalion on my right hadn't even crossed the line of departure, and they were held up. So I had nobody on my right flank. And that was just a bad day.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Wow. And I think you told me that you guys regrouped and you came back and attacked them at like 3 o'clock in the morning or something.
Well,
that little town.
We moved around behind them 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to surprise them and take the objective without any more difficulty. The Monte Foss is, I said, right near Tri Points. Tri Points is very important because that's where 6th Army, the German 6th Panzer Brigade, Army was stopped, really. A guy by the name of
Piper,
who was leading the attack, he got to Trois Points, and the bridges, it's named Trois Points because there are 3 bridges there. The Americans had blown all those bridges, and he was unable to get across the river there, and he kept screwing around. The first thing you know, he's out of gas. He had planned on capturing some American supply dumps, and he wasn't able to do it.
Well, and the other thing that hampered him, wasn't it, that the road conditions were so bad that they got bogged down and the traffic jams and things of that nature.
Incidentally, it was Piper that was responsible for the massacre at Malmedy, or Malmedy, however you want to pronounce it. It was his column, or his lead column, that encountered the tail end of the American troops that were moving from up north down to Saint-Vif.
Yeah, and those guys were just lined up in the field and shot.
Yep.
Yeah. Boy. Then Bastogne was still under siege at this time.
Bastogne was under siege until, I think it was Christmas Day, when the 4th Division, a battalion commanded by Abrams, moved in and made contact with Bastogne.
That was the 4th Armor, and it was Lieutenant Colonel Abrams, as you mentioned earlier. That was on Christmas Day of '44. And those guys didn't have an easy go of it either, because they lost 1,000 men and 28 tanks. And as history reflects, just as you told us earlier, the weather cleared, then we had more Air Force. We had Air Force for the first time, period, and you had artillery. But up until that time, you were badly outnumbered and outmanned and outgunned.
Yeah, why we didn't have artillery support at on the 3rd of January, I don't know. I guess it's because my attack didn't have a high priority. I don't know.
Well, that and you guys as a reactionary force were moving around a lot. But okay. Now then, where were you when the war ended?
I was up at a place called Aachen. Aachen, just about 15 miles to the east of Aachen, Germany. Aachen had been devastated by the Americans, and we marched back to Aachen and loaded aboard trains and went down to a place called Joigny, France, and old French barracks. Joigny is not on there.
Okay.
But we went to Joigny, the idea to get ready for another airborne operation. But the Americans were moving so fast at that particular time, it wasn't time to have another airborne operation. So when the war ended, we were at an airfield up near Lille, France, which would be about up in there.
I'll put a double X there.
Lille, France.
Well, then, after the war ended, did you still stay in Germany for a while?
Nope. When the war was over, we moved to a port, boarded ship, with the idea we were going to go to the Pacific. We were to stop by Fort Bragg, pick up replacements, get new equipment, go to the West Coast, and head out to the Pacific.
My.
Fortunately, while we were aboard ship, going back to the States, the Truman dropped the atomic bomb, and that was the end of things.
And so you still ended up going back to the West Coast?
We ended up staying at Fort Bragg, really.
Oh, okay. All right. Did you finally get some leave time at that point?
Yeah, I got 2 months leave.
Did you? Great. Where were you living?
Well, I had just gotten married, so we hadn't established a household. My wife was living with her parents out in Ellis, Kansas.
All right. Well, I started this series by telling you folks about this great generation, and there is so much more about World War II, such as landing at Anzio, the everything that happened on D-Day, June 6th of 1944, where we tried and did take back France. When I say this great generation, I mean these folks all dropped everything they were doing to get into this combat and to defend this country because it was that important. There were movie stars, there were athletes, the people that gave up their occupations and their careers and went into this combat in order to drive back these foreign forces. Fortunately, we never had any attacks on the mainland United States, but these guys fought all over the world. They were in Africa, they were in Italy, they were in every country you can think of, all through Europe. Some of the most vicious fighting that went on. And this is kind of what was expected of these guys. There was a fella you all know that landed, he was a private, 21 years old, landed at Anzio. And because he was 6'7" and the water and the waves were jumping high, he was ordered to jump out of the landing craft first so that the shorter men would know that it was safe for them to get out. So Jim jumped out and was immediately struck by machine gun fire. And when I say machine gun fire, the enemy was shooting .50 caliber. We throw words around like this and you don't understand what I'm talking about. A .50 caliber round will cut a 2x4 in half at half a mile. So Jim jumped out and was immediately shot. He wasn't killed. He was taken to a hospital. He laid up in the hospital for about a little over a year. These were serious injuries that he suffered. You would know him 10 years later as Marshal Matt Dillon of Gunsmoke. That was James Arness. And his brother Peter Graves also served during World War II, as did Jimmy Stewart, as did Clark Gable, and the list goes on and on. So there's a reason we call these folks the greatest generation. I'm going to give you a couple stories here and why General Seitz deserves to be at the top of this list. When Doug and I talked about doing this program about 2 years ago, the first name that came up was my neighbor Dick Seitz. And I told Doug, I said, there's two reasons why he won't do this show. One is I won't ask him. And the second one is he won't do it. He summed up his 35-year military career for me in '77 when he said the right place at the right time. You're a guy that came out of the reserves at 6 months of trying to earn a few dollars to go back and finish your degree, which you did. And you got your master's degree in Nebraska, as I recall. Is that right?
No, I got my degree in education at Nebraska.
Oh, did you?
It wasn't a master's.
Okay, all right. Anyway, life went on for him. And it must have been, we were neighbors. I was at a Army class for field grade officers, and his name came up, General Seitz. And I became the envy of the class when I told them General Seitz was my neighbor. It was a command and general staff school, and we talked about his leadership of the 18th Corps, for example. The 18th Corps, Dick, was how many people?
Well, when I had the Corps, I had 3 divisions, about 70,000 people.
And you were the commander of the Corps from '72 until your retirement?
Right.
Okay, and you retired in '75 and moved to Kansas, back to Kansas.
The best thing I ever did.
Yes, it is. And I'll tell you what kind of a legacy General Seitz left. This summer, a Major General Airborne, that's 2-star, left me a medallion that looks like a fine piece of jewelry. It's an airborne medallion. And he said, they never served together. He said, you give this medallion to General Seitz and you tell him He was never a member of the Airborne Corps. Pause. He is the Airborne. And, you know, what a legacy.
You're more than kind.
No, I'm not. Oh, I knew you were going to say that. I saved it up here.
You're more than kind.
No, here's what you normally say. You know, when I go over the top and try to say something nice about him, it's horse feathers, so, which is one word, I believe. I've kept track of him over these 35 years. Recently, and this is the way he is, when I asked him finally if he would do this show, he said, "If it will help your program, I'll do it." That sentence defines a man, because that's who he is. And he recently received an honor at Fort Riley. He's never stationed there, never commanded a unit there, but they named an elementary school after him. It's a beautiful school, and I wanted to go out there and see if the leadership was still here with the man. So I went to that school and with some friends of mine, and we met the young principal lady there, and she showed us the school, and she indicated to me that General Seitz is out at that school once a week, and he meets with these kids. What an inspiration it must be for those kids. A few minutes ago when we were in here, I was waving around and forgot that I was on camera, because Dick and I were both excited to see a young lady come in here, and I won't mention her name, but she received the Seitz inspiration. These little kids that he talks to in these schools, this is something they'll remember for the rest of their lives. Particularly one little guy that when you went into the classroom with the principal, and the principal said, what did the principal say? Were these kindergarten kids?
Oh, these are about the first or second grade.
Okay.
So, do you know who General Seitz is? He says, yes, he's named after our school.
He's named after our school. That was funny.
I thought that was pretty good.
That was hilarious. But I mean, that's who he is. And I can go on, but I'm going to get another horse feathers if I do. I don't want to quiz him about the important people that he knows and the less important. I fit the less important category. I know that General Petraeus gave a symposium at Kansas State University because an E6 in the Army who had never met me but was helping me said I met General Seitz there because Petraeus pointed him out as being indebted to General Seitz for his confidence and his advice throughout the years. And this story goes on and on. There are numerous people at Fort Riley, enlisted commanders, makes no difference, that says when we departed to go overseas, General Seitz was there. When we came back, he was there. So it's like I said earlier, if this is retirement, I don't want any part
where's
of it.
That horse
I know what you're looking for.
Where's that horse feathers?
All right. Here, I'll give it. This is what we're going to end up on, because there it is, horse feathers. Thank you. I know we went over, and this is going to be a very interesting interview for everyone.
I'll end up by saying I've had lots of neighbors in my 35 years in the Army, and since I retired. Roger's the finest neighbor I've ever had.
And I'll end up with the last word, and that's because I'm the only one that didn't shoot at him. Thank you, folks. We appreciate it.